The morning discipline that builds unbreakable men. The war is won or lost before breakfast. Not the obvious battles, those happen throughout the day, but the real war, the one that determines everything, happens in the first hour after you wake up. In that narrow window when your alarm goes off and your mind is still groggy, when your body wants 5 more minutes and your discipline says no. That's where men are forged or broken. Most people lose this battle every single day. They hit snooze. They reach for their phone. They let their mood decide their morning. And by the time their feet hit the floor, they've already trained themselves in weakness. They've already voted for the person they don't want to be. But there's another way, the way of the disciplined, the way that doesn't wait for motivation or good weather or the right feeling, the way that builds something unbreakable through repetition, so quiet most people never see it happening. If you're ready to understand why the most successful, most resilient, most unshakable men all share one thing: a morning discipline that runs whether they feel like it or not, then stay. Because what you're about to learn isn't just about mornings. It's about becoming someone who doesn't negotiate with weakness anymore. Here's what most people don't understand. Your morning isn't just the start of your day. It's the training ground for your character. Every decision you make in those first minutes, to get up or hit snooze, to face the day or scroll through someone else's life, to move your body or stay comfortable, these aren't small decisions. They're declarations. You're announcing to yourself who you're choosing to be today, and your brain is watching. Your nervous system is taking notes. And every time you choose comfort over commitment, you're teaching yourself a pattern that will show up when it really matters. Think about it. If you can't win the battle with your own alarm clock, how are you going to win the battle with your fear when opportunity demands courage? If you can't control yourself when no one's watching, how are you going to stand firm when everyone is? The morning is where you prove to yourself that you're serious, that your word means something, that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, used to write himself reminders every morning, not because he was weak, but because he understood something fundamental. The mind needs to be set, intentionally, deliberately, before the chaos of the day begins. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?" He wasn't talking about his job. He was talking about his purpose, his character, the person he was building through daily discipline. And he did this every morning. The most powerful man in the world, still working on himself, still setting his mind, still choosing who he wanted to be. Because he knew what most people forget. You're not just waking up to another day. You're waking up to another opportunity to build or betray yourself. And that choice, made in the quiet, when no one's applauding, that's where your real strength comes from. Most people wake up reactive. They check their phone immediately. They let emails and messages and news determine their mental state before they've even gotten out of bed. They give away their attention before they've decided what deserves it. And then they wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, behind, before they've even started. But the disciplined do it differently. They treat the morning like sacred ground, a non-negotiable window where they set their foundation, align their mind, prepare their spirit for whatever the day brings. Not because they're special, but because they've learned that everything flows from how you begin. Let's break down what that actually looks like. 1. The conquest of the alarm. The first battle of the day happens before you're even conscious. Your alarm goes off. Your mind, still foggy, immediately starts negotiating. Just 5 more minutes. I didn't sleep well. I'll start tomorrow. I deserve rest. And right there, in that moment, you're at a crossroads. One path leads to the person you said you wanted to be. The other leads to the person you've always been. Most people choose the familiar path. They hit snooze, and in that one small act, they've lost before the day began. Because hitting snooze isn't about sleep. It's about negotiation. It's about teaching yourself that your commitments are flexible, that your word to yourself doesn't really matter, that comfort gets the final vote. And that pattern, that willingness to negotiate with your own standards, it doesn't stay in bed. It follows you everywhere. It shows up when you should speak up but don't, when you should push yourself but quit, when you should hold a boundary but fold. The conquest of the alarm is about something deeper than waking up early. It's about building integrity with yourself. It's about proving, in the smallest possible way, that when you make a decision, you keep it. The Stoics called this acting with virtue in the smallest things. Not because the things themselves are important, but because your relationship with your own word is everything. When you set an alarm, you're making a promise to your future self. At this time, I will get up and begin. And when that alarm goes off, you have a choice. Honor that promise or break it. Most people break it without thinking twice, and then they wonder why they struggle with commitment in larger areas of their life. But here's what happens when you win this battle consistently. You build trust with yourself. You prove that you're not ruled by feelings, that you can do hard things even when your body protests, that your discipline is stronger than your desire for comfort. And that self-trust? It's the foundation of everything else. Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL commander, says it simply: discipline equals freedom. But the discipline starts here, in the dark, when you're tired, when no one knows if you got up or not, when the only person you're accountable to is yourself. The practice is brutal in its simplicity. Set your alarm for a specific time, not a range, not around 6. A time, 5:30, 6, whatever you choose. Put your alarm across the room so you have to physically get up to turn it off. When it goes off, count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on 1, you move. No negotiation, no bargaining. You just move. Because here's the truth. You will never feel like getting up. Never. The feeling you're waiting for, that surge of motivation, it doesn't come before action. It comes after. You get up. You move. You splash water on your face. And then, only then, does your mind start to wake up and realize, okay, we're doing this. But you don't wait for permission from your feelings. You act in spite of them. And every time you do this, every single morning you choose to get up when you said you would, you're casting a vote for a different version of yourself. You're building evidence that you're the kind of person who keeps promises, who doesn't negotiate with weakness, who can be counted on, especially by yourself. This isn't about being extreme. It's not about suffering for suffering's sake. It's about recognizing that the first decision of the day sets the tone for every decision that follows. When you win the battle with the alarm, you carry that momentum forward. You've already done something hard. You've already proven you're in control. And that makes every subsequent challenge slightly easier. But when you lose, when you hit snooze, you carry that momentum too. You've taught yourself that discomfort wins, that your commitments are negotiable, that when things get hard, you fold. And that shows up in everything. In the workout you skip, in the difficult conversation you avoid, in the project you procrastinate on. It all traces back to that first moment, that first negotiation, that first surrender. The conquest of the alarm is where you draw the line, where you say, not here, not today, not anymore. It's not the most important thing you'll do all day, but it might be the most revealing. because how you do anything is how you do everything. And if you can't win here, in the privacy of your own bedroom, where the only opponent is your own resistance, how will you win out there when the stakes are real? So win here first. Make it non-negotiable. Get up when you said you would, every single day, regardless of how you feel. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're building someone who can't be broken by discomfort. Someone whose word actually means something. Someone who understands that discipline, practiced in the smallest moments, becomes the armor that protects you in the largest ones. 2. The sacred stillness. The world is loud, aggressive, demanding. From the moment most people wake up, they're plugged into chaos. Emails, news, messages, other people's emergencies becoming their priorities. And in that noise, they lose themselves. They spend the entire day reacting instead of creating, responding instead of leading, surviving instead of building. But there's another path, and it starts with stillness. Before you give your attention to the world, you give it to yourself. Before you check what everyone else needs, you check in with what you need. Before you consume anyone else's thoughts, you clarify your own. This is the sacred stillness, and it's non-negotiable. The practice is simple. After you get up, before you do anything else, no phone, no email, no input from the external world. You sit in silence for at least 10 minutes. Not to meditate in the spiritual sense, but to create space, to observe your mind, to let the mental noise from yesterday settle so you can start today with clarity. Most people are terrified of this. They'd rather scroll through their phone than sit alone with their thoughts for 10 minutes. Because sitting with yourself, really sitting, without distraction, forces you to confront what's actually there. The anxiety you've been avoiding, the decisions you've been postponing, the truth you've been running from. But the disciplined don't run. They sit. They observe. They face whatever arises, not with judgment, but with awareness. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that imagination runs wild when you never give yourself space to examine it. Your mind spins scenarios, creates problems that don't exist, amplifies fears that fall apart under scrutiny. But when you sit in stillness, something happens. The noise quiets. The stories lose their grip. And what remains is clarity, simplicity, truth. You start to see your thoughts for what they are, just thoughts, not commands, not facts, just mental events passing through consciousness. And from that place of observation, you can choose which thoughts to follow and which to let go. You can separate signal from noise. You can align yourself with what actually matters before the day tries to pull you in 1,000 directions. This isn't about becoming Zen or spiritual. It's about practical sovereignty. When you start your day with stillness, you set your own tone instead of inheriting someone else's. You move from a place of intentionality instead of reactivity. You remind yourself who you are and what you're building before the world tries to tell you who you should be. The practice can be simple. Sit somewhere quiet. No phone, no book, no input. Focus on your breath. In, out. Nothing complicated. When thoughts arise, and they will, notice them. Don't fight them. Don't follow them. Just observe. There's anxiety. There's planning. There's a random memory. And bring your attention back to your breath, again and again. That's the training. Noticing when you've been pulled away and choosing to return. This isn't about achieving some perfect meditative state. It's about building the muscle of attention, the ability to notice where your mind goes and redirect it. And that muscle, That capacity to observe your mental patterns without being controlled by them, it's the foundation of everything else we're building. Because you can't control what you don't notice. And most people go their entire lives never noticing their thoughts. They just live inside them, assuming the mental noise is reality. But when you practice stillness every morning, you create distance, space, the ability to see your mind working instead of just being worked by your mind. And from that space, you gain power. The power to choose your focus. The power to reject thoughts that don't serve you. The power to stay centered while everything around you is chaos. Marcus Aurelius practiced this. Every morning, he would prepare his mind. He'd remind himself of his principles, examine his thoughts, set his intention. Not because he was weak, but because he was wise. He knew that the external world would test him. People would make demands. Problems would arise. Chaos would press in. But if he started from a place of internal clarity, if he'd already set his foundation, he could meet that chaos without being consumed by it. That's what the sacred stillness gives you. Not immunity from difficulty, but immunity from being overwhelmed by it. So protect this time. Guard it like it's sacred, because it is. This is where you remind yourself who you are before the world tries to tell you. This is where you build the center that holds when everything else shakes. 10 minutes, every morning, no exceptions. Not because you're trying to become enlightened, but because you're training the most important skill you'll ever develop. The ability to be with yourself, observe yourself, and direct yourself. 3. The physical declaration. Your body is the first battleground. Every morning, it wants to stay comfortable, warm, still. It will give you 1,000 reasons why you should skip the workout, delay the training, start tomorrow. And every morning, you have a choice. Listen to it or lead it. The physical declaration is about establishing dominance over your own flesh. Not through punishment, but through discipline. You're teaching your body that it doesn't get to vote on what you do. Your mind decides. Your will directs. Your body obeys. This is primal, fundamental, and most people never establish this hierarchy. They let their body's preferences dictate their actions. Tired? Don't train. Sore? Rest. Uncomfortable? Quit. And in doing so, they build a pattern of surrender that shows up everywhere. But when you move your body first thing in the morning, when you train despite the resistance, when you push despite the fatigue, you're declaring something powerful. I am not ruled by comfort. I am capable of hard things. My will is stronger than my body's protests. And that declaration echoes through the rest of your day. The Stoics understood this deeply. They practiced physical training not for vanity, but for virtue. Epictetus taught his students to train their bodies to endure hardship. Not because hardship was the goal, but because a body trained in discomfort doesn't fold when discomfort arrives. The modern world has made us soft. Everything is designed for comfort. Climate control, ergonomics, convenience. And in that softness, we've lost something essential. The ability to endure. But you can reclaim it, starting every morning, with movement, with resistance, with the deliberate choice to do something physically demanding when your body wants ease. This doesn't have to be extreme. You don't need to run a marathon or lift insane weight. You just need to move with intention, with discipline, with the understanding that this isn't about fitness, it's about forging character. Maybe it's a workout. Maybe it's a cold shower. Maybe it's a weighted ruck through your neighborhood. The specific activity matters less than the pattern you're building. Voluntary hardship. Chosen discomfort. The practice of doing difficult things when you don't have to. because that's what separates the strong from the weak. The strong do hard things when they don't have to. So when they have to, it's not new. It's just Tuesday. David Goggins talks about callousing the mind. And that's exactly what physical discipline does. Every rep, every mile, every cold shower, you're building mental calluses. You're training your nervous system to stay calm under stress, to push through discomfort, to not quit when things get hard. And that training doesn't stay in the gym, it transfers. When a difficult conversation needs to happen, you don't avoid it, because you've trained in discomfort. When a project requires sustained effort, you don't quit, because you've built endurance. When fear tries to stop you, you move anyway, because you've practiced acting in spite of resistance. The physical declaration is how you build that foundation. The practice. Within the first hour of waking, you move, you train, you physically challenge yourself. It doesn't have to be long. 20 minutes of intense work beats an hour of going through the motions. The goal isn't exhaustion, it's engagement, full presence, giving yourself completely to the movement. And you do this regardless of how you feel. Tired? Train anyway. Sore? Modify, but don't skip. Don't want to? That's the point. Because you're not training for fitness, you're training for discipline. For the ability to do what you said you'd do, regardless of how you feel about it. And over time, something shifts. The resistance lessens. Not because the work gets easier, but because you get stronger. Your body learns the pattern. Your mind stops negotiating. It just becomes what you do. And when that happens, when physical discipline becomes non-negotiable, you carry a different energy. People feel it. You move through the world with a confidence that doesn't come from ego. It comes from evidence. You've done hard things already today. You've proven to yourself that you can push through resistance, that you're in control, that your word means something. And that evidence creates a momentum that carries you through everything else. 4. The mental fortification. Your mind needs fuel. Not the garbage that most people feed it. Doom scrolling, news cycles, social media comparison. But real fuel. Ideas that strengthen, wisdom that anchors, truth that builds. This is the mental fortification, and it's where most people fail without realizing it. They wake up, and within minutes, they're consuming content designed to trigger them. Outrage, comparison, fear, other people's opinions about things that don't matter. And by the time they've finished their coffee, their mind is already polluted, and they wonder why they feel anxious, scattered, reactive. But the disciplined protect their mental space. They understand that what you feed your mind in the morning shapes your thoughts for the entire day. So they choose carefully. They read philosophy. They study wisdom. They consume content that makes them better, not just content that makes them feel something. Marcus Aurelius read Epictetus every morning, not for entertainment, for fortification, to remind himself of principles that would carry him through the chaos of leading an empire. He didn't need new information. He needed to remember what he already knew, to align himself with truth before the day tried to pull him into pettiness. That's what mental fortification is about. It's not about learning more. It's about grounding yourself in what matters before you engage with what doesn't. The practice is simple but powerful. After your stillness and movement, you read. For at least 15 minutes. Not the news, not social media, not email. You read something substantive, something that challenges you to think deeper, act better, be stronger. Maybe it's Stoic philosophy. Maybe it's biography of someone you respect. Maybe it's technical knowledge for your craft. Whatever it is, it should make you better. It should add value, not just noise. And you do this with full attention. No phone nearby, no distractions. Just you and the text, absorbing, reflecting, integrating. This seems simple, almost too simple. But here's what it does. It sets a baseline for your thinking. When you start your day with wisdom, you think in terms of wisdom. When you start with philosophy, you approach problems philosophically. When you start with depth, you carry that depth into shallow situations. But when you start with junk, headlines designed to trigger, posts designed to enrage, content designed to distract, that becomes your baseline. You think in terms of reaction. You approach everything from a place of triggered emotion. You lose depth before the day begins. Carl Jung wrote, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." When you fortify your mind with substance, you train yourself to think instead of judge, to analyze instead of react, to understand instead of assume. And that changes everything. Your conversations get deeper, your decisions get clearer, your reactions get slower and more thoughtful. You're not being pulled around by every stimulus. You're grounded, centered, operating from a place of principle instead of impulse. The world needs people who can think, who can hold complexity, who don't collapse into tribal thinking or emotional reactivity. And that capacity starts here, in the morning, when you choose what enters your mind. 5. The intentional design. Most people don't plan their day, they just survive it. They wake up and react to whatever comes. Emails determine their priorities. Other people's emergencies become their agenda. And by the end of the day, they're exhausted, not because they did meaningful work, but because they were scattered across 1,000 small things that didn't matter. But the disciplined do it differently. They design their day before it begins. They decide what matters, what gets their best energy, what can wait, what needs to be ignored entirely. This is the intentional design, and it's the difference between living your life and letting your life live you. The practice is simple. During your morning routine, after stillness, after movement, after reading, you plan. You look at your day and you make decisions, not about every detail, but about the big rocks, the 2 or 3 things that, if you accomplish them, would make today a success. Everything else is secondary. Everything else can be rescheduled, delegated, or eliminated. This forces clarity. It forces you to confront what actually matters versus what just feels urgent. And most people never do this. They treat everything as equally important, which means nothing is actually important. But when you identify your non-negotiables, the things that move your life forward, you create a filter. When something tries to pull your attention, you can ask, does this serve my priorities, or is it just noise? And most of the time, it's noise. Stephen Covey taught about urgent versus important. Most people spend their lives trapped in the urgent, responding to emails, putting out fires, reacting to crises that aren't really crises. But the important, the things that actually build a life worth living, those get neglected, because they're not screaming for attention, until you make them scream, until you put them first, until you protect them like they're sacred. That's what the intentional design does. It says, these are my priorities. Everything else arranges itself around them, or it doesn't get done. And when you operate from this place, when you're clear about what matters, you stop feeling guilty about what you're not doing, because you've already decided it doesn't matter. That clarity is freedom. 6. The nutritional foundation. Your body is a machine, and like any machine, it requires the right fuel. Most people sabotage themselves with breakfast. They start the day with sugar, processed carbs, caffeine on an empty stomach, and then they wonder why they crash by 10 a.m., why they can't focus, why they feel foggy and scattered. But the disciplined understand. What you put in your body directly impacts your mental state, your energy, your ability to execute. This isn't complicated. You don't need a perfect diet. You just need to not poison yourself first thing in the morning. Protein, healthy fats, real food, not sugar disguised as breakfast, not stimulants covering up poor sleep. Feed your body like you respect it, because you do. It's carrying you through everything you're trying to build. The practice. Make your first meal intentional. Prepare it the night before if necessary. But don't grab whatever's quick. Don't default to what's easy. Because how you fuel yourself is how you respect yourself. And that respect shows up in everything else. 7. The zero tolerance policy. Here's the final pillar, and it's the one that makes all the others sustainable. No exceptions. No negotiations. No just this once. The morning routine is sacred. It's non-negotiable. It runs whether you feel like it or not, whether you slept well or poorly, whether it's a weekday or weekend, whether you're home or traveling. It runs, always. Because the moment you make exceptions, you've destroyed the discipline. You've taught yourself that the routine is optional, that your commitments are flexible, that you can't be trusted. And once that door opens, it's almost impossible to close. The disciplined understand this. They don't negotiate. They don't make excuses. They just execute. Not because they're robots, but because they understand that discipline only works when it's absolute. Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. But that only works when discipline is non-negotiable, when there's no debate, when the answer is always yes, regardless of circumstances. That's what builds unbreakable men. Not perfection, but unwavering commitment to showing up, even when, especially when, everything in them wants to quit. So what happens when you put all of this together? When you conquer the alarm every day, when you sit in stillness before the chaos, when you move your body with discipline, when you fortify your mind with wisdom, when you design your day with intention, when you fuel yourself properly, when you maintain zero tolerance for exceptions, you build something most men never will, an unshakable foundation. Not loud, not flashy, just solid, reliable, immune to the chaos that breaks everyone else. And that foundation carries you through everything, through failure, through success, through the mundane and the magnificent, because you've trained, not for one big moment, but for every small moment. And those small moments, stacked daily, become the life you actually want to live.